Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Firstly, this tale is not the Lake Baikal Greentext that everyone knows about. This one originates from Russia. If you wish to hear that Greentext, then check out Chassis, Kex, or Time 6's renditions of it. The links will be posted below in the description. Now on to the show. I once worked as a volunteer in a nursing home in the typical Russian countryside. I already had experience in the field, so I was assigned to a ward where there were some very insane old people, most of whom did not know who they were, or how to use the toilet, or how to hold a spoon, etc. Some of them couldn't even speak anymore, while others were talking completely incoherent nonsense. But there was one old man who stood out among the others. He looked perfectly healthy and sane. His gaze, however, was always lost, as if frozen, and his whole face seemed to express a slight amount of grief and sadness. There was only one peculiarity about him. Sleepwalking. Once, on the night shift, I saw him sitting for a long time and perfectly still on a couch with his eyes wide open, staring somewhere at one point. He spoke very little, and there were practically no other patients to talk to him. So I wondered what was wrong with him. I began to say hello to him, to offer my help, and to bring him some sweets. In general, I tried to get his attention and talk to him. And after a while I did manage to get him to talk about the books he was reading. Surprisingly, he spoke quite coherently. I did not see anything strange about him, so it became more and more a mystery to him to be in this place. So, we talked more and more each day, but when asked about him, about how he got here, the old man shrugged it off and didn't answer anything. But then on one of the last days, before I had to finish my volunteer work and go back to school, he came up to me and said he had a story to tell, which I'm now going to tell you. So, his name is Oleg Vladimirovich. He was born not long before the Great Patriotic War, far away in Siberia. And the war, of course, affected his family. His father was killed at the front, his mother worked all day long, and received a severe injury at work. They were constantly starving, then his mother died, and he ended up in an orphanage. When Oleg turned 18, he had no choice but to go into military service. However, he wanted this. He was a patriot. He wanted to protect his country from any threat, to make sure the horror of the war that befell his family would never happen again. He got into the naval forces, became a submariner. For example, he had experience of work on submarines, was psychologically and physically ready to spend a long time underwater in a confined, cramped space. He had a good reputation and a high secrecy clearance. He served on a nuclear submarine. And then in the mid-60s he was suddenly transferred to Irkutsk, and the clearance was increased. Anyone may ask, why did a naval serviceman have to go deep into the country, where there is no access to the sea? Oleg, too, was surprised, but, of course, no one would explain anything to him. They said, you'll find out on the spot. The only guess was the testing of new submarines in Lake Baikal, but it would have been very strange. As it turned out, the assumptions were not so far from the truth. He was told in Irkutsk that a military test was being conducted on Lake Baikal and was sent to a village on the shore, from where a simple fishing boat took him by night to a large vessel that looked like a research vessel. He could not say at what point of Baikal it was located. They put him in the hold and turned off all the searchlights on the boat. It was a long sail, more than 4 hours with stops, slowly moving. I had a question: how was this ship guarded from prying eyes? But I did not interrupt the old man. However, it probably was not so difficult. They didn't explain much to Oleg on the spot. He was told only that some anomaly had been detected at the bottom, and that it was necessary to go down there in a bathysphere and report what he had seen, as well as to explore the vicinity of the descent point for anomalous cavities. There would be one more person in his team with him, a physicist named Alexander. He would make some measurements and collect samples of the ground from the bottom. But why do we need a military man to investigate the anomaly? Why such secrecy? Why is it necessary to lower the bathysphere with people, and not first take photos of the bottom and measurements with the descent instruments? There were many questions, but Oleg did not care much. An order is an order. After all, a physicist should certainly know more about these studies. With these thoughts in mind, Oleg went to bed. In the morning he had to get acquainted with Alexander and go through preparations for the descent during the day. And the day after the descent itself was to take place. At that moment I realized that the most interesting thing was about to happen, and I would not be able to remember everything in detail myself. So I stealthily took out my phone and turned on the recorder. Here is a transcript of the recording.
Well, in the morning we met this physicist. He looked very young, as if he had just graduated. However, they couldn't send a green student on such a serious assignment. I also thought, what the hell do I need him for? I could do everything myself. Just tell me what to do. I'm not a fool. I can look at the instruments and write down everything that is necessary. I thought that an order was an order, and if they decided to send us down together, there was nothing to complain about. So, first we were shown the bathysphere for diving. It is just a tin can on ropes with oxygen cylinders, instruments and telephone for communication with the surface. I'm familiar with them. I even had special training. In the Soviet Union there were plans for deep sea diving. But it was the first time that Alexander had ever seen one. But we were given a short and to the point briefing, then we had a test dive. I noticed then that Alexander was a little nervous in the cramped bathysphere. I thought again, what the fuck was he here for? What if he starts panicking during the dive? Maybe that's what I'm here for. During dinner I had a chance to talk freely with Alexander. Here it turned out to be a very strange circumstance. He himself had no idea what we were there to explore. He was simply told what measurements to make, but he did not know why. I didn't question him. Maybe he wasn't allowed to talk about it, and I wasn't supposed to know. But I had my doubts, a bad trait for a soldier. I didn't get much sleep at the time. My thoughts tormented me. It was all too strange. Unusual. Why go down at night? What can be so useful and interesting here? Why the military and the secrecy? The only thing I could answer myself at the time was, there is an order, you follow it, and in the end everything you need to know, you will learn already there.
Here Oleg sighed heavily and asked for some water. I could see that it was getting hard for him to tell. But he continued.
And there we were, Alexander and I in a cramped bathysphere, being told that we are ready to descend. There is nothing in the portholes. The light of the powerful lanterns scattered everywhere in the darkness, and only the instruments and periodic phone messages indicate the movement. I keep an eye on the dive. Everything is all right. Only my partner was sitting, rocking from side to side with excitement or nervousness. So a lot of time passes. Everything starts happening at a depth of 900 meters. Alexander abruptly stops spinning. I see him clinging to the seat. He looks at me and asks quietly, "Did you hear that?" I didn't hear anything. The phone was silent. We were surrounded by tons of water. There was simply no sound to be heard here. I said, "No. What did you hear?" He tensely replied, "Nothing, forget it." As we drive on, I notice that he occasionally jerks his head, listening. After a while, he says, "Something's wrong with the phone. Do you hear that muffled voice?" I think they forgot to turn it off. I can't hear a damn thing, for the life of me. I put my ear to the speaker, nothing. I think the guy's overreacting. I should calm him down. And then the message came from the phone. Go about 50 more meters to the bottom. Then the control is completely on you. Let me know when you see anything. Tell me when you see something. I answered that I understood. I told Alexander that it was time to go to work, look through the window. We needed to understand when we would be close to the bottom. Slowly we continue our descent. Here it is. We can see how the light from the spotlight hits the uneven surface. So we keep going. Then my partner says in a very stifled voice, "Look." I turn to his porthole and see, about 20 meters away there is a cave with a round entrance. It looks creepy. I myself feel a kind of unpleasant unease. And in the next moment, it intensifies tenfold. Not far from the cave lies a body. A human body. Let me explain. Baikal is an unusual lake. Firstly, there are small crustaceans, which eat all kinds of carrion, and they can devour a human body completely in 2 days. Secondly, the water here has almost no impurities, so the bones can dissolve in 2 weeks. That's why a drowned man's corpse can't be identified or found. And here it is, lying there quietly. When I saw it, I froze for a while, and my partner was staring at it with a stony face. I came to my senses and began to report what I had seen. But I didn't have time. Alexander shouted sharply, "Fuck." No, turned it around.
Oleg stopped, picked up the glass with a trembling hand, and took a sip.
That dead man. He was coming towards us. Literally walked. Slowly, very unnaturally, shifting from foot to foot. His face. There were no eyes, but there was a strange, twisted smile. This thing, I just didn't know what to do. My head felt like it was about to explode. I couldn't think straight. Alexander began to repeat quietly and quickly, telling me to go up. I reached for the phone, shouted out, "Emergency. I'm beginning the rise." I pulled the ballast relief valve, turned around, and I don't know how to describe it. I've never been so scared and terrified in my life, even though I've gone through so much. Alexander. His face is right in front of mine. He's staring blankly and smiling. There's this weird, twisted smile on his face. There was a terrible ringing in my ears mixed with some kind of screaming. I blacked out. Then I woke up. First I heard a loud noise coming from the speaker and someone whispering through the noise. I opened my eyes and saw Alexander against the wall, with open, empty eyes and a frozen smile. I began to remember what had happened. From that moment I did not move, froze in one position until we reached the surface and began to be pulled out of the bathysphere. Alexander was dead, his neck was broken. I was picked up under my arms without asking anything and taken to the cabin, where they locked me up. After this, there were several interrogations. They did not like my story, and in the end they accused me of murder and declared me insane, and sent me to a mental hospital, where I spent a long time. They gave me so many medications that I could not understand anything. I was like a vegetable, and memories of that descent were constantly turning chaotically in my head, as if I was in one big nightmare. After the Soviet Union collapsed, the hospital I was in closed and I was transferred here.
I didn't know what to say, so I just thanked him for his story, brought him some water, and said goodbye. Even as I was leaving, the horror gradually took hold of me. I remembered what was strange about his sleepwalking face. It had an unnatural crooked smile on it and a glassy frozen look. I never went to that place again and never saw Oleg again.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.